It's difficult to get this stuff set up because you have to change mindsets, you have to change processes, you have to change how you gather data. But once you've done that, it becomes so easy, and you have reports that are easy for you to look at. You've made it part of your conversation with your teams to say, well, did we have the impact we expected? And you already have a bunch of ideas and iterations of things you might want to try, but then you get so much more from it.
Good morning, Evie Brockwell.
Hello.
Founder of Be Optimized. You make teams really good at product through consulting, coaching, writing and speaking. You used to work at booking.com, all whilst traveling the world and now doing a podcast.
Indeed. No, it's quite a good summary. I'm like, I do so many things.
Well, it's your summary because it's off
I
LinkedIn.
know.
So,
I'm like, it sounds good when you play it back to me.
sometimes you read these out, or I read them out, and people are like, who's that? And it's like, it's you. It's your profile. All I've done is rip it off there. I mean, apart from that, who is Evie?
So I'm mostly a product coach and consultant, and I used to work for booking.com. Obviously, I've specialised in travel for quite a long time, but I quit there at the end of COVID because I knew that I wanted to go and travel and do more. And then I was like, I'll try and give this independent kind of work a go and see what happens. So I started off by doing some conversion audits and like working with different people on more simple product stuff. And then it just evolved through conversations I had with people where they'd be like, oh, could you help us with this? Could you help us with that? And now I've got to a point where I get to refine it and focus on the things that I really care about and I really want. So
yeah, well, I was going to go straight into that, and we'll get into all the product stuff and all of the more niche side of product and the things that are interesting to you. But when I was doing sort of LinkedIn stalking, I'm not going to call it research, it was LinkedIn stalking essentially. I was interested in your journey into freelancing because from the outside, it really looks like you're creating something that suits the life you're trying to lead. So I just wondered if you could expand and tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm like, it's been a journey and it still is. So when I started, my primary objective was to travel, and I was like, well, as long as I can afford to live in these countries each month, I don't really care how much I earn beyond that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of nice because I think a lot of people are scared to take the leap because they're going from like a full-time salary, whereas I was quite content and I wanted a bit of time off work. And then I was setting my own boundaries at that point in time to say, well, I'm only going to work 1 or 2 days a week because that's not my primary objective. So I think from the start, because I've had really clear motives, it's made it a lot easier for me to be clear on what it is that I want to do. But then ultimately at the start, I ended up taking on work that wasn't completely where my passions were or wasn't completely aligned with what I wanted. And I was working more in teams and working with people on some of the day-to-day. And then I got a business coach last year to work through some of that because I was working, last summer I ended up working like 4 days a week, and I was like, oh, this isn't quite what I intended. However, I ended up in this place.
Yeah.
So we did so much work on focusing on what my values were and what my boundaries were. So now I'm in a place where I basically created like 5 values for myself. I should be able to remember all of them because I reflect on them every week, but it's things like freedom, growth, working on things that are fulfilling. And now I basically make sure that when I take on work, it ticks those boxes.
Yeah.
And also if I'm going to take on work with anyone, I'll set those boundaries to say, I've tried to move away from working with people day to day, and instead it's like, okay, here's the objectives, here's the things that we want to achieve, whether that's creating a strategy or improving our product maturity, and I'll be available for meetings between these hours and these hours. But I'll do the rest of the work to fit around that. And by having those conversations, I've been able to find people where they're like, yeah, perfect, that works for us as well. So it's in quite a good place now.
Have you ever had a conversation where someone has said that doesn't work for us?
100%.
And have your values been pushed, and what was that like?
Yeah, and I think it's hard. Some people have the traditional mindset of like, we still go to work from 9 till 5 and that's what we expect from you, and that's what we expect from the rest of our team, so you won't fit with this organization if you don't do that. And it's quite an easy conversation for me because it's like, okay, well, I don't want to take on that work, or we could work for say a month and try and get this thing done, and I can try and be available between these hours and these hours, but it's impossible for my time zones sometimes. So if people are happy with that, it works. If they're not happy with that, it's a relatively easy conversation to know that that's not what I want to do, and they can find someone else that can work in that space.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, because I think sometimes as freelancers or business owners, whatever bracket one wants to put themselves in, it's realizing you're not going after the 100%.
Yeah.
You're going after like the 80%. Sorry, the 20% that get it, not the 8 and the 80% are never
Yeah.
going to understand, and that's okay. But you can make a really good living and a really good life off the, probably, to be honest, less than 20%.
Yeah,
The
you
people
don't
who
need to do that.
understand it and want to work with you.
Yeah. Um, and even to start off with, it was a case of me thinking like that. I think that transition from that business mindset of I'm here to serve everyone and do what I'm asked for
Mm.
to no, actually, I'm an expert in this field and these are the things that I specialize in and this is what I can help people with.
Yeah.
That was the more difficult mindset transition, and feeling like I always needed to be available and always needed to be on Slack because that's kind of what we're taught in the corporate world.
Yeah.
And then once you get out of that and you see yourself more as a business owner and a specialist and you're adding value in all of these different ways, it really helps, but you really need to do that mindset shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And clients need to be trained as well, don't they?
Yes, I'm sure you have more experience in that than I do in terms of those expectations and everything, because that is half of it.
To a certain extent, but I still fall in the same trap of sitting at the desktop and just waiting.
Yeah.
And you're just watching YouTube shorts of comedians, thinking, but just in case someone emails me, I need to be able to jump on it. So I still do it now. It does take quite a long time to get out of that. And it's like getting out your own head as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is about you. I suppose in a world of product managers, product management, product owners, product marketing managers, in your own words, what does all of that mean to you? So what does product management mean to you, to make it simple?
Yeah. And then when you throw all those terms out there and like the ways that different companies are doing this now,
Yeah.
it's not easy at all because product is done differently. There's some standardized things which I'll explain, but it is done differently in every company and there's different expectations for what you'll do in that role. So if anyone's ever applying for jobs, I'm always like, make sure you really check what that skill set is, what they're asking for, how that company works, because there's a whole spectrum where it can range from doing stuff that's more project based through to being pure product. But for me, product is about adding that extra value. So it's not necessarily about focusing on delivery. It's about working out what the best things are to deliver and how to deliver those in the best way to deliver the most value to that end customer. So yeah.
What are your thoughts on projects or project-focused organizations, which there's nothing wrong with, that then have product managers? Like, does that work? What are your thoughts on that?
So it can work if the product manager is given, even if you're working on a project, you know you've got set deliverables that you need to get out because you've got a contract signed with a different client that you're delivering on behalf of, for example. It makes sense for it still to be a project. But if you're going to hire product managers, there should still be freedom within that project to define exactly what the scope is and define exactly what good looks like. So if you already know what the solution is and that's been fully designed, it makes no point to have a product manager. You really want someone that's focused on delivery. But if you say, right, we want to achieve this goal or this outcome by this deadline, but we don't know exactly what that looks like, that's where product can help and support refining and defining that and learning from everything that you ship along the way.
So playing that back, and again, like, I want you to disagree with me because I'm trying to think of people who ask me questions.
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that some organizations hire a product owner / manager, which we'll get onto that, the difference between those in a minute,
Yeah.
but really need a delivery lead?
100%.
And the reason I ask that is because when I speak to people in, say, a large bank, these people are product owners by title. Say they're working on the banking application, but the real product owner or product manager is so far up the ivory tower. These product owners get, diluted essentially to writing user stories, working with the team. How can someone navigate that, bearing in mind they have no sort of autonomy or control over the title they're given.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and so this is where it's the tricky thing in terms of identifying what it is that you want to do, because I still know some people that want to focus on that. They want to work within the team. They want to just focus on delivery. And then that's great. Like that's a role that will suit you even if that title's different.
Mm.
But if that's not what you want, if you want more autonomy, if you want to figure out what you want to do, then you have to make that really clear when you're having an interview and play that back to
Yeah.
someone else and manage those expectations from the start. If you still end up in a scenario where you've been hired for a role and it's not quite what you expected, then the only thing that I can advise people to do is to try and implement some techniques, not exert too much of their energy trying to do everything, but try and prove the value of saying, okay, for the next 4 weeks, like let's try and take an outcome and we'll work through defining what good could look like for that. And then try and come up with some success cases internally that you can play back to the business. And then if they see value in that, you might be able to create more autonomy for yourself. If you can't, if you're fighting a losing battle, sometimes it is time to move somewhere else and find a role that actually suits what you want to do a bit more.
Yeah, totally agree. What is, I don't know if it's yours, as in, I don't know if you came up with the term or came up with your version of this thing,
Yeah.
but what is the product maturity model?
Yeah. So, I mean, there is so many product maturity models out there, and I think we've all got a different interpretation on what one is. Because when I was creating mine, I went through and did a bunch of research, and some of the product maturity models just talk about the maturity of being a product owner through to being like a head of product, a group product manager, or whatever you want to call it. So they're more like skill set based. And then there's some that just look broadly at like the product organization, the product function, and then there's some that look particularly in terms of this is one specific product and this is whether that product is mature or not. So yeah, this it covers a whole range of things. But from my perspective, what I look at is how mature the organization is in terms of how they do product management as a craft. So it's not about a specific person or their role. It's not about the product in terms of the digital product itself.
Yeah.
It's about how they operate as a business. So that's everything that I've looked at. And through all of the work that I've done when I worked in house and all of the work that I've done with all of the different clients that I've worked with, product is still super complicated. There are so many areas that fall under product, but it's everything from setting your vision and your direction and your strategy and your plan through to once you've shipped a feature, how are you measuring how well that's done, taking those learnings and feeding those back. Plus there's like extra bits that I put in my model around you need to communicate out with the business and you need to work with stakeholders because product people have to do all of these things. So what I've tried to do in mine is distill all of those main parts of product and say what good looks like.
Yeah. Again, thinking about the people who may be listening, watching this, however they're consuming it. I come from a world where it's quite, there's debate of how do you measure a good Scrum Master? How do you know if an Agile coach is doing what they should be doing? From a product manager point of view, is that a bit easier? And like, how do you measure whether a product manager is having the impact that an organization would want?
Right. And I think that's the more nuanced, difficult part because the product manager can have an impact, but it's the same with all of those other roles. You're only part of a cog that's contributing to the impact.
Yeah.
So you could be the best product manager in the world, but if you don't have a really strong delivery team behind you, it's really hard for you to add any value because all you're doing is fixing bugs and delaying shipped code.
Yeah.
So it can be really difficult. So you need all of those things to come together. And the same thing with like if you don't have a great data set, then your insights aren't going to be accurate. So it's really hard to make the right decisions if you don't have those things. So all of these things need to come into play together, but you can define what a great product manager looks like overall. It's just sometimes harder to show the impact if you don't have all of those other things.
And what do they look like?
So for me, it's really someone, if you distill it down to a couple of main things, it's someone that's really willing to learn and reflect. So that can be anything from learning how you work with a team, how you work with different stakeholders, how you learn what your customer wants. But that skill set of no matter what topic it is, being able to learn and reflect and improve is 100% crucial. And then beyond that, it really is a case of being able to work with a load of different people to get the right things. So whether that's working with stakeholders to understand what they want, whether it's working with someone to understand what it is that your customer really wants, whether it's working with the team to really make sure that they understand what it is you're trying to ship, that ability to work with a whole group of people is really important.
And is that where your focus on continued optimization comes from? Because I saw this, and again, I'll read it word for word, and then maybe you can explain it a bit further. It's quite the LinkedIn with the character limit is quite hard sometimes, but you put, want to deliver more value as a product team, easy focus on continued optimization. Teams too often have a long cycle time from idea to delivery, a full roadmap, leaving no room to iterate. This means that teams throw features out to customers. I think we've all been there. Don't take the time needed to assess their impact, and don't allow time to actually maximize their results. The cycle is not complete when the feature is delivered. It's complete when you've tested, learned, and iterated. Fix this by ensuring you have easy access, reports set up for experimentation, allowing time in your roadmap for iterations, and make discussing results as part of your process.
Yep. I can expand. So and I'm sure you've been in the same position where you work with a bunch of teams and it's all about coming up with the right ideas, and you still might do some testing at that point. You might get different insights. You might validate stuff through customer research. You validate prototypes and you're like, okay, cool. We've done all this discovery. We're going to ship this thing now. And then it just gets shipped and that's it. And sometimes people will look back and they'll say, oh yeah, like we think it had this impact. But sometimes teams don't even do that. They're just shipping things and moving on to the next, especially in that kind of project world that we spoke about. And if you're not measuring the impact, and if you're not reflecting on that and saying, yeah, this was great, we've learned these things even from the fact this was good, because we could probably capitalize on that benefit by adding this to another part of the journey or making this feature more prominent or anything else like that. If you're not doing that part, or if you're not looking at it and saying, well, actually, like we really thought we were going to have this impact and we didn't achieve that, so therefore, even though we did all of that discovery, clearly we had an assumption here that wasn't correct when we shipped this to the wider world. If you're not making time to then go through and work out how to improve those things, then again, in my opinion, you're kind of doing more project-based delivery than product. And it isn't like, it's difficult to get this stuff set up because you have to change mindsets, you have to change processes, you have to change how you gather data. But once you've done that, it becomes so easy because you either run experiments, or sometimes you can still do pre and post analysis, and you have reports that are easy for you to look at. You've made it part of your conversation with your teams to say, well, did we have the impact we expected? And you already have a bunch of ideas and iterations of things you might want to try. And you're not necessarily writing a whole bunch of new code. You might just be tweaking a couple of things, but then you get so much more from it.
And my brain's on fire at the moment. So I'm about to ask you a question that I didn't sort of set up.
Yeah.
How much of a role, in your opinion, because I'm learning a lot about this at the moment, does brand play? And the reason I ask this is because I'm a bit of an amateur marketer or marketeer, whatever. And there's stats that suggest when people are looking for a problem to solve, most of the time they go for the top two options.
Yeah.
So as underdog brands, you have to have a different offering. So I just wondered, from a product management point of view, how much of a role does brand play, and how much does the product manager influence that?
Yeah. So on this, I'm always like, well, it depends. What's your outcome? What are you trying to achieve? Because again, if you're doing like purist product management, you're usually looking at certain results, like, are we converting more customers? Are we reducing contacts? Are we increasing the value of the products that people buy? But if you're trying to grow something and grow your brand, well, you might be trying to aim for a new target audience, and they might not be converting as well to start off with. So you need to be having these conversations at the start about what is it that we're really trying to do, because that might be increasing market share, that might be reaching a new target audience, and that stuff's more brand focused.
Yeah.
So depending on those things, it's like, and depending on the scope of the product manager, it's like, okay, who should be leading these conversations? Because if you're doing some more of that stuff that's more brand focused, I recently worked with a client that was doing a rebrand, And there was so much of that where it was different bets that we'd have, and we didn't necessarily know what was going to succeed because it was for a whole new audience.
Mm.
So it was going back to the basics and saying, okay, well, what customer research have we done? What do we want this brand to stand for? And therefore, what do we think is important?
Yeah.
In that space, we've got these kind of top 10 bets. Let's try and ship all of those things and see what sticks, see what's meeting that target audience, and we learn from there.
Yeah.
And then once you've matured a little bit and that product is out there to the right people, then it's easier to go back to some of the stuff we were just talking about in terms of continuous optimization. So
Yeah.
I think it depends on the
Yeah.
life stage.
Because it's not always the best product that wins, is it? It's
No,
the best like brand.
exactly. It's like my phone completely broke yesterday. I had to go to the Apple store, but I'll still always buy Apple products.
Yeah. Maybe I'll correct myself there. Not the best brand, but the one that has the least tension.
Yeah.
Like I always give the example of Red Bull tastes like cat piss,
Yeah.
but it stops people from causing a pile up on the M6 at 4 a.m.
And it's easily accessible. So
Yeah.
you're like, and then you know it. So you're like, cool, great, grab that. I know what it does.
Yeah.
We don't always think, and we can be quite loyal. Like we need those. I think this is quite true in banking, even though there's been obviously people that have come in and disrupted things now, and it's so much easier to switch accounts, but people are still reluctant because it's just work.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can just get by so far because people just can't be bothered to do anything else.
We're loyal and we're lazy.
Exactly.
As a customer.
100%. And it's like sometimes I think people forget the psychology behind how people work. And if you remember those two factors, then I'm not saying that's how you should work because you really want to make yourself exceptional, but they are super important. You could be making the best thing in the world, but if you've not given people the easiest way to switch to what you're doing,
they're not going to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's a word you haven't used, which I'm a big fan of you not using it. And I was scrolling through some of your content, and it's a word you don't use in any of that either. So, and that word is agile.
Yes.
So, yeah, what are your thoughts on capital A agile as a whole, and then the community in general?
I'm always like, how do I say this to a person that works in Agile without saying anything offensive?
But see me as someone who doesn't, because the truth is, I'm not at the moment. I'm not really at the moment. Like, so I'm not going to be offended because I probably have this. I may have the same thoughts as you. So.
And honestly, I think there's a place for Agile, and I really think that it was an amazing thing that came into the world and completely changed the way that everyone thought.
Yeah.
As with everyone calling a job role product, everyone kind of just got on the Agile train and the Agile hype and never really thought about what it meant to them as a company or why it would be beneficial to them. People just kind of implemented this, oh, well, there's these rules here, so therefore we should do these things. Which is why I don't particularly like using that wording, because people have so many connotations with the fact that it's this prescribed thing that people should implement. And actually, like, I don't see that being where the value is. I think I use this word so much, but everything's so nuanced. It's all about what you're trying to achieve as a company, what your values are, where you think you've got gaps and where you need to improve. And that might be in the Agile space. It might be that you need Agile coaches and you need to get better at delivery. But so much of Agile focused on that part of it, which was so essential, right? Like now that we're in a place where a lot of teams are doing that better, people can start to think about the fact that they might be delivering really well, but they need to deliver value up the chain. And I don't necessarily think Agile with a capital A covers that.
Yeah, and I think what we discussed before about the psychology of a customer, like I'm not a psychologist, but broadly, we need to understand why people are lazy, why they're so loyal. I just think it's really commendable that you have done well to avoid it, and not fall into that trap of not getting into those threads, and which can be quite toxic at times.
Yeah,
I think. Do you see any of that? Did you avoid it on purpose? Like,
it's kind of like that. I see it and it reminds me of like the Facebook things that happen. It's like you're on LinkedIn and then there's this just people are arguing about like Agile and safe and all of these things. And to me, it's just irrelevant. It's like that's a different tool or mechanism to achieve your end goal. Yeah. So choose what works for you as a business. But I think people that obviously work in that space become really passionate about the fact that they think that's the right way to do something.
Yeah, I was reading something last night and about polarization and about polarization coming from fear.
Yeah.
And the more fearful people are, the more people sort of back themselves. And that's why we have this divide
Yeah.
in loads of stuff. And then that leaves little room for nuance and conversation. And I think if you've been doing something for a long time, you obviously become, it's only natural, or it could be seen as only natural that if you think people are questioning that, but you could become fearful,
Yeah.
and then you sort of hedge your bets even more. I mean, have you always had that relationship on LinkedIn, or have you been on there a while, or is it something you've sort of, as you've moved away from being in-house and you've gone freelance, and it's like a platform you've started to utilize further?
Yeah, so I've been on there. I mean, I've been on there for such a long time, but never really. I might post if I went to the odd conference, like, oh,
Yeah,
look
yeah.
at me, I went to a conference. But then, especially during COVID, during lockdown, I started to do a lot more writing anyway because I was living on my own. So I used writing as a tool for me to even understand how I was thinking and what I was feeling.
Yeah.
More just from like a mindset point of view and all of the change that we were going
It's
through.
cathartic, isn't it?
So cathartic. It's like now it's my main tool for anything about how I'm thinking and feeling. And I think this is nothing to do with product, but it's related to everything we do in life. I
Yeah,
just
of
don't
course.
think that we understand ourselves enough as humans. Like sometimes I'll act a certain way and I don't know why I've done that. And then by sitting there and reflecting and writing, I'm like, oh, I behave like this because of this. And it's mad that like people don't take the time to do those things. And I say it's applicable to everything because that's everything about how we work and how we interact with people. And I really think that it benefits people to spend more time in that space. And that's why I quite like LinkedIn now, because it's changed from just people saying, oh, I went to this conference, to people really having these kind of conversations about how we act and operate as people and the best way to work in teams and all these different opinions about the best way to do product. And it's a great sort of education for me.
Yeah.
But it also really helps me. Like, I only came up with this product maturity model by sitting there and writing down my thoughts about how different organizations work and diluting that into something that makes sense to me that I can then share. So it's a really great process for anyone to go through their own method of thinking and then have that conversation with a wider audience.
Yeah.
And then obviously it's more beneficial now for actually trying to attract clients and making sure people know what you stand for.
Yeah. How have you found that in terms of generating leads and stuff? Because there'll be people, contractors, freelancers, whatever they badge themselves as, and people are still, from my experience, reluctant. You see, especially maybe not in the work that you and I do, but if you're a contractor and your contract's coming to an end, that's the only time you post on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And then there's an expectation that people are going to come flooding in, or the offers are going to come flooding in. And sometimes that does, that is true. Most of the time now, it's not. So have you found that whole sort of trying to generate leads? Is there any advice you could give to any freelancers, contractors out there?
Yeah. And that was my mindset to start off with, because I kind of I just posted a few times on LinkedIn letting people know what I was doing. And from that, I managed to get a few pieces of work and I was kind of fully booked. So
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I don't know who these people are that are posting on LinkedIn every day. Like, why are they bothering doing that? Like, you can get work without that. And then again, this is when it shifted, when I started working with my business coach, because I was getting work, but it wasn't necessarily the work that I wanted, and I wasn't front of mind for people at all points in time. And like I say, it wasn't helping me to do that practice of distilling my own thoughts and understanding how I feel. So I definitely think it's better to be a bit more proactive on there, because, and it's not just about the work that you get instantaneously, but it's the network and the connections and the conversations that you grow and have over time that really, like, even if that's in 2 years, they land you your dream gig that you might have never realized you could have. So yeah, it's always, if you just want to get paid and go home, obviously it's a different story. But if you want to like foster those connections and really set yourself up as an expert in something in particular, I think it's hugely beneficial.
What should people or people within organizations be focused on outside of the whole product bubble, do you think? Is there anything, where else do you draw inspiration from, essentially?
In terms of my work and what I think about, honestly, it's so many different sources, but it's everything we were saying about, like, how do you understand people's psychology and how people operate? And that's sometimes like, how do you do that for your customer, but also how do you do that for people in your team? So I think anything you can do in terms of reading and understanding, and even the part I was saying earlier about getting to know myself and how I operate, any of those tools and techniques. So I like to read a bunch of articles, I read some different books. And
What are you reading at the moment?
Oh, I always have like 3 or 4 books on the go at once, and it takes me so long to read them all. But I'm reading 2 books at the moment. One is called The Power of Being You, which is all around your own psychology and how you manifest certain things. And I don't completely believe in manifesting, like I'm going to sit here and wish for this thing and the universe will make it happen.
Hashtag The Secret.
Yeah, but I really think that the way that we work psychologically is that by sitting there and thinking about what our goals are and what we really want, that's front of mind for us, and we become dedicated to that thing, and we look for opportunities in those spaces. So I think it's more for my opinion on it, is that it's more of a psychological tool. But this book's quite interesting because it's teaching you about the fact that you can remove some of your limiting beliefs and things that have happened to you in your past and what might be stopping you. I know we were talking about this earlier in terms of like, sometimes when you come from a working class background, you come from more of this scarcity mindset, and therefore you don't necessarily expose yourself or allow yourself to go for these other opportunities because you just don't believe that that should happen for you in your world.
Like a squirrel trying to gather nuts for winter, but all of the time.
Exactly, and just believing that you actually deserve something. So it talks about a lot of those things. And then I'm also reading one that's really interesting, which is called Give Work.
Okay.
And obviously, because I'm doing a lot of traveling, it's like you work in these places all over the world, and you can really see the disparity between the Western world and when we think we're suffering versus how people live in places like South America. And this woman, her perspective behind development economics was that she should go and set up a company that allowed her to outsource work that people could do on computers to places like Africa, and make it easy for people to access those jobs and try and live people out of poverty by giving them actual opportunities. So again, super interesting.
On that, what's van life all about? What's van life like?
Hashtag van life as well. If you cut this podcast in certain ways, it would be like, oh, she's such a like typical hippie digital nomad.
We'll be kind. But you say that, but what's wrong with that?
Honestly, nothing. And again, this was one of the things where I had my own stereotypes behind this, and I was like, I don't want to be one of those people.
Well, you don't smell, so you obviously don't live in a van all of the time.
No, I don't. I'm in a flat at the moment. But yeah, so I got a van because I was traveling for probably a year, and I was really traveling. I was working 2 or 3 days a week, but I was moving locations every 7 days. And it just gets a bit tiring. Like, you're constantly leaving people behind. You don't have a wardrobe. Like, you just constantly are packing stuff up in a backpack. You're always leaving something in a hotel room. Like, it's a great lifestyle, but I was like, oh, I'm a bit tired of this. So I decided to get a van because it gives me a great hybrid between the two. You can still move location every couple of days, but you have all of your stuff there, and it's like a home away from home. So yeah, I got a van in December. I like designed the conversion with this amazing guy that was in Newcastle who's got loads of experience and helped me come up with some great ideas. So now it's fully set up for me to be able to work there, live there, and travel as much as possible. So yeah, in a week, I'm picking up the van again and going around Europe for a couple of months. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Sounds exciting. It's got what, internet, Wi-Fi, running water? What?
Yep. It's got all of the things. So I can live there fully. I've got a shower, I've got a toilet, I've got Wi-Fi. Sorted.
Yeah.
So yeah, you usually need to fill up the water probably every 3 days or so. But yeah, you can go completely. I was in Scotland for a week. And you can just park at these amazing spots by the beach and sit there, and even with no phone signal, the Wi-Fi router manages to get enough Wi-Fi for you to watch Netflix. So
that's the main thing then, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I've not tried video calls with people from work yet, but you can do everything else you need to do. So yeah, it should be a nice setup.
I like it. What else? We should probably talk a bit more about product, shouldn't we?
The boring stuff.
I mean, what's in the product management kitchen? What if you were to 2 or 3 ingredients for organizations to benefit from good product management or ownership? Actually, difference between product manager and product owner? Park that last question,
Okay.
because that'll be another one that people are going,
Yeah, what is
why isn't he
that?
asked that?
So to me, I mean, again, there's so
Again,
many
from
definitions out there, but from my point of view, a product manager focuses a bit more outside of the team and they look more at where are we trying to take this product? What do we actually want to achieve? What's the right way to do that? And a product owner a product owner role was created to be part of the Agile team. And the main objectives were that you can prioritize a backlog and help the team to write user stories and make sure you're shipping value. So the product owner role is a lot more in-team delivery focused. If you think about the product manager team, about being the product manager being a step removed from the team.
yeah,
And again, there's so many different setups. Sometimes you have a product manager and a product owner. I don't really advocate for that because I think that's just an extra communication layer.
I think the Scrum police, and this is not to say I agree with it, but I
Yeah.
think some people would say that the product owner is the product manager within the Scrum framework.
Yeah.
So some people would debate that everything that you've just described as the product manager doing outside the team, in a true Scrum sense, the product owner should be doing that as well.
Yeah.
That's very aspirational.
Exactly.
In a big organization, I think that's where it becomes difficult for someone to do that. So I can see why they're different.
And I think being a product owner in the team, because even through my career, I've done all of these things. And being a product owner in the team can be a full-time job anyway.
Yeah.
If your delivery team isn't that experienced and they're kind of expecting to be spoon-fed and babysat in a way, is like my opinion on it.
Yeah.
Then you're needing to write all of the user stories and generate all of the backlog priorities, and even doing things from going through and sitting down when someone's finished that code and you say, well, actually, no, like you've not achieved this thing and this thing. I've worked in teams where I've had to do that as a product owner.
Yeah.
And therefore you don't have time or capacity to go through and think about what you could and should be doing next.
The psychology of the customer.
Exactly. Like you cannot sit there in 1 minute being like, oh, you didn't meet this acceptance criteria in this story that I wrote for you. And then the next day being like, oh, what do our customers really want? And how can we really deliver exceptional value? Like it's really hard to operate on those two layers and all of your time's taken up. Whereas I've worked in an organization where the delivery team was super mature. We didn't even have a scrum master. We didn't have a delivery lead in the team, but we had engineers that would create the user stories because they knew where we were trying to take the direction of the product, and they would be able to say, oh, well, we know we were trying to achieve this goal, we were doing this thing and that part of the code was really hard, so we've thought about doing this in this way because we still think this will achieve this goal. And they're able to play back those conversations and effectively run themselves. Then I was able to be a product owner / product manager because the percentage of time I was spending doing the product owner stuff, I could then spend so much more of that time thinking about where we take things, but also involving the team in that, because that really helped give them context about what we should be doing next.
Cool. Like it. Back to the original question. 2 or 3 ingredients that organizations or teams need to get the benefits from good product.
So I think the main place where people fall down is that they don't have a firm and clear strategy that they can pass on to teams for them to know what to do. So as we spoke about earlier, the value of product is all about someone coming up with the right things to do and why. But that could be anything. If you've not had those conversations about, well, are we trying to be more brand focused and therefore we want to reach this new target audience and this is what our overall product plan is, and this is what we want to achieve, you can't really give people the autonomy to do the rest of it. So you end up having people that are very, they're dictating what you need to do because they have all of that information in their heads, but they've not been willing to articulate it and share it so that product owners or product managers can work in their own way. So strategy is 100% essential. And then beyond that, I would say having the right tools and techniques to be able to really understand and gather the right data and insight to make sure that you're solving those things in the right way.
Sorry to interrupt. Are there any? How do you do that? Is there any tools out there that people could go and have a look at
for product strategy?
No, for getting the data. Are there any sort of readily available places that people can?
So there is like, even if companies don't have things built in-house, you can obviously easily use things like GA4,
Okay.
but you need to make sure your reports are set up in the right way for you to get the right information about what customers are doing on your website. And obviously GA4 is great if you're trying to analyze what people are already doing on your site.
Yeah.
If you're trying to work out what a new customer wants, then it's creating the right spaces to do that research. And again, you don't necessarily need tools. That might be that you already have people on your email database, or you know what customers you're trying to reach, and you can set up your own interviews with them. But you can obviously use other tools that are usually paid for, so things like use a Zoom that allow you to attract different people. So it depends which stage.
That's really helpful, because I know people are going, oh, how do we do that?
Yeah,
So,
sounds great, but where do we start?
So strategy, data. What's the final one?
And then I would say the final one is the bit that we spoke about earlier in terms of continuous optimization. So really making sure that you measure, learn, and iterate from there.
Okay. Is there anything else on your mind that you'd like to?
Honestly, I'm like, we've covered all of my favorite topics. Like the things that I usually talk the most about are things like strategy and things like continuous optimization, and trying to really extract that extra value. I focus far less on the delivery side of things and how teams should work from that point of view. So yeah, I'd say we've covered all the big bits.
Where can people reach out if you'd like them to? What have you got to plug? What are you selling?
Oh my God. As I was saying earlier, like I do everything now. It was like I started off doing consultancy and was like, okay, I'm going to work with people and not necessarily do the work, but help people create the strategy and do the hands-on stuff. And then I started doing more coaching. I was like, okay, like if someone wants to work out how to progress their product manager career, or they just want to be the best head of product, I can work with them on a more ad hoc basis, and then they've got the tools to do it. And then I started writing, so I've got like writing stuff on my blog and also on Medium. I also started a podcast. So
what's that called?
It's called Product Confidential.
Where can people hear that?
They can hear it on all of the podcast platforms that they might.
I'll link it in the description as well.
But yeah, we try and speak to people about the actual day-to-day of doing product management. So it's a great place to hear more about some of those stories of this is how product management works in different companies. They're the main things. So mostly everything that I'm talking about, you'll find on LinkedIn.
Okay. Website? Might as well. You might as well get the
most. That's eviebrockwell.com. So basically search for Evie Brockwell. There's not really anyone else with my name, and you'll find hopefully all of the good bits.
All right. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's a good chat.
Yeah, really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this month's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, please let us know in the comments. And also, tell your mates, like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.